Helping provide insight for what's at stake here is Latin American analyst Rafael Salies. He is an independent consultant for Latin American business intelligence and risk advisory. Rafael, I want to get your read on things there in Rio. What are people saying about what's happening in the Amazon?
Well, most of the discussion here in the Southeast is about the government and its role in this, how it has emptied out major regulatory bodies and that should be overseeing the region and the environment in Brazil as a whole, which is where the discussion is more or less at. It's not a real discussion on facts on the ground in terms of how to combat these fires, what resources are needed. That type of discussion is still has not begun. So I'd say that it's very much still enclosed into the affected states in Brazil.
From the outside, a lot of voices expressing concern about what's happening. Of course, the UN Secretary General saying on Twitter, "I'm deeply concerned by the fires in the Amazon rainforest. In the midst of the global climate crisis, we cannot afford more damage to a major source of oxygen and biodiversity." Of course, Lucretia mentioning that as well in her report. French President Macron tweeting, "Our house is burning, literally, the Amazon rainforest. The lungs, which produces 20% of our planet's oxygen, on fire. It is an international crisis." Yet, from inside Brazil, you hear Bolsonaro saying it's environmental groups and non-governmental organizations setting these blazes. No evidence to support that. You've got Greenpeace, a key figure in Greenpeace Brazil, saying it's the increased deforestation and Bolsonaro's anti-environmental policies that are to blame. So how is the back and forth being viewed there?
It's being viewed as just another part of our current political status. A lot of the discourse coming out of the Bolsonaro camp is one very much founded on a string of thought that is prevalent inside the Brazilian army. Two, it is also a string of thought that is viewed as a right-wing string of thought in discussion. Whereas the environmental groups, because they're traditionally identified with left-wing parties, are seen as the left-wing opposition. So the whole discussion on the fires and why they're happening and who caused them are being viewed in certain ways and being framed inside the general political process that Brazil is undergoing right now in terms of how the Bolsonaro government is governing the country and dealing with the country's institutions such as Congress, the judiciary, and the number of the state bureaucracies that are under his command.
That's the political piece of all of this. Let's talk about what's at stake, though, because the Amazon is home to millions of animals and plant species, hundreds of indigenous tribes. So there is a lot at stake. Describe the concerns.
One of the concerns is more or less with indigenous populations. We've seen in the past where major development projects such as the Belo Monte Dam have taken over and led to major deforestation. The local populations that lived off the river, such as fishermen or indigenous tribes, have gone into squalor and are now living in poor socioeconomic conditions in crime-riddled cities such as Altamira. And the pattern of the fires is very much following main areas of deforestation. If I'm not wrong, roughly 37% of the focuses of fires undergoing right now are following the patterns of deforestation. So this is something that is going to impact indigenous tribes a lot more than it will your city citizens. But however, even those are having to deal with the fallout from ash clouds, major visibility concerns, your health issues from respiratory concerns that comes from all this smoke going up in the air. So, and it reached Sao Paulo at the end of the day. So we're seeing how this is all going into the climatic system that revolves around Brazil, and it's affecting people's health and people's livelihoods.
And Rafael, there have been about 74,000 fires in the Brazilian Amazon since the beginning of this year, and experts say this isn't even the peak of the fire season. That stretches until October. So what's the greatest fear in the country right now?
The greatest fear is that this gets more out of hand than it already is. The local states are already undermanned, underfunded. Bolsonaro's short-term policies in the environmental area have already led to defunding of the Amazon Fund by both Germany and Norway, which has a key role in funding anti-fire measures and anti-fire equipment in these states. So the main concern right now is that the government will not be able to get a handle on this. Now, that being said, outside policy circles, the main concern, day-to-day lives, the main concern where people are concerned, the main concern is that the government is actually wanting that this goes on and increases, right? That this serves them politically, that this serves them in their social economic targets and goals. So, I mean, there are two concerns that go hand in hand in some ways, but at the end of the day, it still remains to be seen. Where the Bolsonaro government is concerned is he wants to handle fallout from Brazil's international image, possible international partners, trade agreements that might fall out because of this, as well as any sanctions or contestations he might get from international governments.
Rafael, thanks so much for joining us.